Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Will and Friends Real Estate Edition. This time we're going to be looking into the Natural Hazard Report and just the most frequently asked questions there. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce both Colleen and Vince. Colleen is our Keller Williams operating principal. She's the chairman of the board for our office in Brea, Fullerton, and she's also overseeing multiple offices within the Orange County area as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Colleen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be the operating principal of the Keller Williams, not only in Brea, Fullerton, Anaheim Hills, Yorba Linda, and North Tustin. And I've been with Keller Williams for almost 16 years. And I think that the opportunity that was presented to me to actually have our own preferred NHD company inside of our Keller Williams brand was just another value-added service add that I can provide each and every one of our agents currently and those in the future, such that you can have that service and the value for your clients. And really appreciate the partnership with Vince and Preferred NHD. So thank you again, and thank you, Vince, for helping us and providing such a great product and service that is vital and essential to all of our real estate transactions.
Awesome. Thank you guys for allowing me to do this. I'm happy to share all the knowledge I have from NHD in this presentation, help you gain the knowledge you need, and answer any questions you may have. I'm going to cover the fundamentals of NHD today, go over the concept, what it is, I'll go a little bit in depth of what is each natural hazard zone, where it came from, how it started. And if you have any questions, feel free to stop me anytime. And
for sure. And Vince, before we get into that, can you talk to us a little bit about your background? How long have you been in this field? How did you even get into it? How long, I guess, within the whole real estate, residential, commercial aspect of things?
Yeah, I've been doing about NHD for about 3 years. I came across this report first time when I was buying my condo myself, and kind of got intrigued by it and fascinated how it all started. And I have an engineering background, and basically one thing led to another. I started researching more and more, and I got curious and started working in the whole NHD industry.
That's awesome. And how long has that been?
It's been about 3 years. I want to say since 2017.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Preferred NHD and how, because I know there's a lot of different NHD providers out there. What makes us stand out? I guess this question can go to both Colleen and Vince in regards to what makes Preferred NHD stand out against the competition or people outside.
Well, I just want to say that I think Preferred NHD really stands out. As I mentioned earlier, I really want to be known as a full service brokerage and not only servicing residential, commercial real estate, but also having our transaction coordinators, our escrow division, we have mortgage partners, we have our title partners, and I wanted to have one more added partner. So NHD just made sense. So we all can have access directly, and also our transaction coordinators have access directly. So that way we can even have reports pulled as soon as listings are taken, such that even those just viewing and interested about the property can learn more without actually having to go through the whole escrow process. So super value add. And when I met Vince, that was something I was looking for. Is we wanted you, agents like yourself, Will, to have that access so you could really provide more value to those clients of yours and be able to have a unique value proposition with that included.
For sure. No, and Colleen, I appreciate you providing that context, because most people, most consumers, unless they go through the process, don't understand how difficult it is to get information, to talk to a representative, to find out and understand, because these are hazardous things that are impacting directly or indirectly to our property. And so we want to know, we want to have that peace of mind knowing that it's okay. It's not as severe as it may seem like on the piece of paper. And so having somebody to be able to speak with, understand, and be able to break down those questions is super helpful within our own company, instead of having to go out to some part of the US where they don't pick up the calls or something along those lines.
Sure, no, and absolutely, and things appear to be more hazardous than they are, but anywhere in the world, we're on top of ground, and so we just want to learn what's underneath us and just be educated of what could happen, and yet most of the time nothing really does happen. So very important for us to educate those buyers and sellers.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think that's a great segue into Vince. Can you share with us a little bit? I think we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about the most commonly asked questions, but I know you have a presentation for us as well, so we can walk through that, and then I can I can ping you or interrupt you in some ways to dig deeper or maybe transition to a different question.
Of course. Just a few more notes on that. Preferred NHD is one of the more innovative NHD companies in California. They're known for their reputation in terms of speed, delivering the reports, one of the fastest in the market, competitive pricing. And besides just an NHD report, Preferred NHD is more designed to be just this fun hub for the agent to be able to obtain the report on day one of their listing. And with that, we also offer detailed property profile and real-time maps feature that no other NHD company has. This gives the agents a competitive edge to share with their especially younger clients who are more data-driven and want to see scientific data. And Preferred NHD enables the consumers with a good amount of information that's far more valuable than other companies.
Yeah, and I think to that point too, because some people, some companies provide the report later for whatever reason. They're processing it slow, they might have a backlog, and that actually could hurt the sellers because if we're not getting the disclosures to the buyers in the right amount of time, then the buyers can have a more extended time frame to be able to do their due diligence, which could undermine the contingency timeframes that we have negotiated. So I'm glad you brought that up too, Vince.
Absolutely, yes. Also, there's no cost to the agents to order the NHD report on day one of their listing until the escrow closes. So it's highly recommended for the agents to place an order on day one of their listing, attach it to the MLS, and to make sure that they are protected. Because if you're in escrow and you place an order, the buyer has legally the right to get out of the escrow. So introducing new information prior to the starting escrow would be the right thing to do. Awesome.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Will and Friends Real Estate Edition. And today we're going to be looking into natural hazard disclosure. And that's something people are very familiar with once they get into escrow, but they have a lot of questions because it's hazardous, right? And so people are scared, but we have a great panel of people being able to talk to us about the most frequently asked questions for the NHD reports. And first off, I want to introduce Colleen Rogers. She's been in the real estate industry for over 15 years now. She's our operating principal, Keller Williams operating principal for 5 cities. And she was formerly the regional manager for Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. So thank you so much for joining us, Colleen.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Will. Thank you so much for having me on as a guest. And I am, as you mentioned, the operating principal for the Keller Williams franchises in North Orange County. And it's an honor to be able to serve all of my agents and all of their clients. And with that being said, it's always been important for me to be able to provide the most value. So you can truly be a full service brokerage and have a unique value proposition to offer. And so not only do we have our in-house escrow, we have our in-house transaction coordinators, we have our in-house mortgage relationships, we have our preferred title vendors, we also have our own NHD, and that's Preferred NHD. And I chose that name for a reason because I wanted to be the preferred NHD company. And the opportunity was presented to me from Vince, and Vince has an extensive background in engineering, and then when he learned about the NHD world, he became very fascinated about it, and I'll let him share a little bit more. And yet I just wanted to be able to have the opportunity to give you, Will, and all of our other agents the access, direct access to the natural hazard disclosure report, such that when you take a listing, you're able to have the information right at your fingertips. So that way no one has to worry about what might come up once escrow is opened. And so thank you so much for using Preferred NHD and your support, and certainly the support that I want to provide to you and all of your clients. So thank you. And thank you, Vince, for being that service provider for my companies.
Thank you for having me, guys. I came across NHD in 2017 when I was first buying my condo. And having an engineering background, I got invested in it more, and I was intrigued, and I wanted to dig in more and find out where is this data really coming from, what drives it. And one way or another, it led me to become starting my own NHD company and providing data to NHD companies. So the technology that we have is far more advanced than some of the competitors out in the field. We're able to deliver the fastest NHD reports in the market. Usually an average report takes about 48 seconds, where the competitors typically can take 15 minutes up to hours or days. Most of our reports are delivered within a minute. Besides just providing an NHD report, we try to make NHD fun and allow listing agents to obtain an NHD report on day one of their listing and attach it to the MLS, which is the right thing to do. And with that, we're also able to provide detailed property profile, which shows all the prior transfers, mortgage records, comparables, which is pretty valuable to have from your NHD provider. And we also have this cool feature called real-time maps, which enables you to zoom in to each of the hazard zone and gives you a nice perspective how that zone affects to the subject property. It's just a nice view to have, which gives the agents competitive edge to use the preferred NHD reports as opposed to some of the other NHD providers.
And I think this is huge because not a lot of people understand that how cumbersome or how difficult it can be to get an NHD report from another provider, especially if this is in-house as an agent who's representing my seller. I want to provide all that information to them up front so that the consumers who are looking to purchase the property has that before them instead of having to wait 7 to 10 or however long that process time is from other companies. You have it at your fingertips. And also for the buyers that I'm representing, I'm able to provide this report immediately so that they can review and ask questions and then probe and this is all in-house, instead of having to go outside. Could be the middle of the US or maybe somebody in a different country explaining these details. We have somebody in-house that's able to look into the information and explain it in a very thorough fashion. So that's why I want to thank Colleen and Vince and your team for being able to provide this for our clients, because it's definitely a leg up in comparison to our competition.
I just want to say too, to that tune, is that it's real time, super up to date. And so as we know, new construction's happening at all times. So we always have that ability to have all that information within minutes. So again, thank you, Vince, and thanks for this opportunity to service our clients and our agents.
Awesome, yeah, my pleasure. So today we'll just talk about an overview of the NHD, answer any questions you have.
Yeah, there's got a good amount of questions, but also thanks so much for joining us, Robert. I'm sure, Vince, you can tee off introduction for Robert.
Yeah, Robert is my colleague. He's also with Preferred NHD. He's going to present some information and go through the report, show how to use the portal. Go ahead, Robert.
All right, so hello, my name is Robert Lamas, and I'm with Preferred NHD. My contact info is on the first slide on the presentation. If we can get that.
Another thing, while Robert is pulling that up, I want to mention Preferred NHD has a competitive pricing compared to other providers. The basic report is provided at $79, and with environmental, this priced at $99. They also provide reports for commercial properties. We have E&O coverage for added protection for the seller. And that's some of the highlights. Too,
if the transaction doesn't end up closing, then there's obviously no cost to the buyer and or the seller. So again, super informative information that we want to make that informed decision to go to the close of escrow. So thank you again for that.
That's phenomenal, because a lot of people are paying out of pocket, and if it doesn't close for one reason or the other, they've lost that money. But like you're saying, unless we close escrow, that's when actual payments completed.
Well, again, I'm super proud to have the support that I do for our NHD, Preferred NHD, and Robert S., who is the mastermind behind all of our reports, is here to lead us through understanding one of the natural hazard reports. So welcome. Thank you, Robert, for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Colleen. So, with NHD, there are public entities that collect data through their consultants or geologists and experts within the specific hazard. We grab that data and create a report out of it. All the laws behind it are driven by California Civil Code 1103. California Civil Code 1103 states that real estate sellers and brokers are legally required to disclose if the property being sold lies within one or more state or locally mapped hazard areas. There are 6 required hazards that need to be disclosed on a statutory form called the Natural Hazard Disclosure, or NHD. The state has its own version of these reports, and the county has its own version. In the next couple of slides, we're going to go over both versions. So on the state level, typically it has 6 versions. It's basically categorized into 3 sections: fire, flood, and earthquake. Let's talk about the flood hazard area first. There's special flood, and then there's dam inundation. Special flood is simply the data that comes from FEMA. Dam inundation is basically any home that is near a dam. So it advises you if you are nearby a dam and there's a breach of the dam, there can potentially damage your home. The next level of risk is the fire. There is very high fire and wildland fire. Very high fire is typically homes that are in hills, and wildland fires are homes that are in the forested areas like Big Bear and Arrowhead, etc. Their third one is earthquake fault zone. That's any home that sits on or within half a mile of an existing fault. You're considered in an earthquake fault zone. Seismic hazard, there are 2 sections to it: landslide and liquefaction. Landslide are the homes that are at risk of a landslide of an earthquake. Any home that's on a hillside and can be damaged from loose soil or from a house sliding off the foundation and damaging another home is on the hillside. Liquefaction is basically an area where the soil is more moist. An example, if you go to the beach and wiggle your toes, the soil is moist and has similar characteristics. This comes with the territory and you can't really do much about it. This is considered a liquefaction zone.
So just to slow down a little bit in that regard, these different 6 different reports, that's just pulled from California, or how does that process look like from behind the scenes, or the context of that?
Yeah, it's just from California. The NHDs are only required in the state of California. They don't require an NHD report in any other state besides California.
I'd like to add something on that as well. So each of these hazard zones, the data itself comes from a public entity. For example, the flood comes from FEMA. The fire-related data comes from the California conservation maps. And on each NHD report, the zones are more described in detail, and it typically provides the source where the data comes from.
So I love it how it's all in one report, so we don't have to go to all these different sources to understand where these homes are lied.
Absolutely. And I think, Robert, so in addition to the state level coverage, each county provides their own sets of data. They send their own geologists to collect the data, and there's public entities as well for each counties that obtain this data and provide it to the NHD companies like ours, which then appears on the reports. So Robert is going to cover the next slide, which is going to talk about the county level determinations.
Yeah, so now on the next slide, we have your local zones, your local hazard zones. In addition to the same state zones, there are some additional statutory disclosures that come from the state Law Civil Code 1103. If the home is within 1 mile of these zones, then they will be marked in. The first one you have is your airport influence. If your home is within 1 mile of an airport and the odors, vibrations, sounds, or noise are apparent at that property, then you'll be marked in. Former military ordinance, that's if you are close to a nearby military base, then you'll be marked in for that. Right to farm, if there's any farming going on nearby, you'll be marked in. Tsunami inundation, same thing. If the home is within 1 mile of a tsunami inundation area, it will be marked in. If you're in a coastal area, it's very, very, highly likely that you're going to be marked in if you live on the coast, if the home is on the coast, because you're at risk of, a tsunami coming in if there's an earthquake. Mining operation, if there's any mining going on within 1 mile, you'll be marked in. Duct sealing testing, almost every single report is marked in for this one. This just lets the buyer know that they can hire someone to test the AC in their home to make sure it's within 15% efficiency. Commercial industrial use, any liquor store or gas station nearby. If there is one nearby, it will be marked in because you are in a commercial or industrial zone. Radon, this is a natural radioactive material. We get our data from EPA for this information and a few other agencies. EPA is the most reputable source. Now, this radon isn't like, you know, what you see in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, you know, where your face starts melting off. It's natural radioactive substance, and you can hire an expert or purchase a test kit and test the levels yourself. If you are within the higher range of that, in that zone, the buyer, you know, needs to know that information. Airport noise area.
One note, sorry, Robert. Robert, sorry, one more note on the radon. The picture on the right-hand side is a picture of California with all the counties. And radon is categorized in 3 levels. The highest level is marked red, medium level is marked orange, and yellow is marked the lowest. So Santa Barbara and Ventura counties are some of the highest radon level in California. And then LA and San Bernardino are more on the medium level, and then all the yellow counties are the lowest level.
Vince, can you talk to us a little bit about why those areas are so high in radon? Are they test so high in that area?
The why part, back in the days, I believe there was a lot of radioactive companies who worked on, I think, chemical weapons back in the days in Santa Barbara and Ventura County that affected that area. But this is, in particular, this is natural radioactive, and it's just all around us. It's not only California thing, but it's pretty much around most of the U.S. soil in general. It is, you know, you can't smell it, you can't see it, and it's just kind of part of our natural habitat. Got it.
And so it's for consumers or buyers who are looking to purchase property, when they see that there is radon gas on their report or they're in it, it's not to be not a red flag in the sense of like, oh my goodness, I'm going to pass away or something like that. It's like it's around us everywhere, but just in different levels and layers.
Right. So the purpose, you know, the buyer has the right. The state wants to make sure the buyer was exposed, knowing that this area, this home, could have been potentially at a higher risk in respect to natural radioactive material. So, you know, they have agencies that collect this data and maintain a database, and they have experts within this field. Like if you go on EPA's website, you can go find a local expert who can come measure the radioactive material on that home and provide the number. And, you know, if you have some sort of health issues that could affect that person, then they have the right as a buyer to know about it. But for the most part, especially in Orange County area, it's a much at lower risk than it would be in Santa Barbara or Ventura County. And it typically just comes with the territory. And but tests can be done and precautions can be taken, and the buyer should know about it.
Makes sense.
Being an East Coast native myself, I think it's excellent that California requires these reports, because coming from out of the area, I would never have known to even ask or know that there was radon in the soil beneath me. So thank you again for this data.
Yeah,
sure. Robert, if you want, go ahead and continue with the airport noise area.
So there's airport noise area also, and this is justified with 65 decibels of noise is what they've set as the standard. If you were at 65 decibels, it means that if you're standing on the street, you can hear an airplane flying overhead. And so if this noise is noise that you hear if you're in an airport area, then you're marked in on this zone also on this disclosure. Asbestos is natural asbestos. It's within the soil everywhere. If you leave it untouched, it's harmless. This typically applies to newer construction where they have to touch the soil. They may do a little more testing for this. Methane gas, that's also natural, comes out of the ground. I'm sure a lot of you heard of it a couple of years ago here in Southern California. There was an issue with methane gas leaking in Saugus, and it's kind of that same area. If they're drilling for methane gas, then you'll be marked in. If there's any kind of, one of the utility companies is drilling for methane gas and there's possibility of methane gas leaking, then they'll mark you in on this for this section also. Soil subsidence. This is a soil that can subtract and contract on its own in some areas. If it does do that, it can potentially damage the property. And it's kind of rare, but it does happen, and it does exist.
Awesome.
Do you guys have any questions about the local level determinations?
So just if I was a first-time home buyer and looking at all of the different areas that are being disclosed, is there a reason for me to be concerned? I mean, if I've never heard of this before, then it may start setting off some alarm bells. What would you say to that?
I would say there's no need to be concerned about it. If it's not, if the natural hazard disclosure report is just disclosing all this information. I mean, I would actually feel safer knowing this information than not knowing it. At least it's there for you. You know, you can always hire experts and hire people to come test to give you an exact rating, if anything. But it's just giving you that information. I mean, pretty much anywhere that you go, I mean, with the airport influence and the airport noise, I mean, we all hear airplanes flying overhead. You're just going to be prone to hearing louder noise if you're closer to the airport. So you're going to hear that airplane taking off a lot, more. You're going to hear them landing a lot more. You're going to be more at an influence, to, the airplane and the air traffic. All these disclosures are just letting you know. They're just letting you know the seller has to, give you that information and let you know, so that way you can't come back and say, oh, well, I, changed my mind. I don't want to purchase this property because I wasn't aware of this information.
It's also for both protection of the buyer and seller. If a seller is selling a home and the home looks in a beautiful area, beautiful street, the buyer drives in, they fell in love with it, and they're purchasing the home. But little they know that less than a mile away there's an airport. And during their showing, they didn't hear this planes flying over. So, it's kind of for the protection of the buyer as well, to know that there was an airport nearby. Or, if you're in tsunami inundation, to some people, it might be an obvious thing that, hey, if I have buying a $10 million home on the water, it's pretty obvious they might be in tsunami inundation area, but again, this is for the protection. It's a disclosure, meaning it's a protection for the seller to not get a lawsuit for the new buyer later on saying, I did not know I would pay $10 million for a home and I would not be in a tsunami zone. So it's for the protection as well. Some of it could be health related, and an extra precaution can be taken to make sure the buyer is at least aware before purchasing such an expensive home.
I think it's very interesting because a lot of the consumers who are looking at these reports are scared when they do see that they're in an airport area, or they're in a commercial industrial, or there's a military base nearby, or they have radon gas. But in reality, their neighbors they're moving into fall into that category, and they've been living there for however many years, maybe 15 years or 7 to 10 years. And they seem to be fine. They're still there. It's not a vacant neighborhood. But I think the biggest question is more so, okay, if my property falls into one of these categories, am I going to be safe? Are my kids, my family members going to be safe living here?
Right. Some example, that's a great point you have. Some examples like liquefaction zone. Liquefaction, technically about 500 years ago, used to be part of a lake. And some of the expensive homes, especially in LA that I'm familiar with, they fall in the liquefaction zone, and we'll show how it looks like in a map after this presentation. But below the surface, there's about 40 to 50 feet below the surface of that home, the soil is a little bit moisty compared to some of other dried areas. So in case of an earthquake, it could damage the home. So again, the buyer should know about it. Can they do something about it? Likely not, because it's if you're buying a $2 million home that's in a liquefaction zone, but you have the view, it's like it comes with the territory. That area is designed that way, and it's kind of our natural hazard area. This is why it's called a natural hazard. You can only affect it so much. You can maybe have a stronger foundation, better construction, right? But again, you have the right to know about it. And
I feel like that's very similar for like earthquake, right? The fault line, right? If you're
right,
very close to the fault line, what are you going to do? You're going to try to rebuild your foundation as best
right.
as you can. It's like you can't do
So
anything about it.
if you look at the fault line that starts from San Diego all the way to Northern California, um, if you look in Santa Monica in particular, right on Santa Monica Boulevard, less than half a mile away, there's a fault line going through it. And some of the expensive homes are located right there. You know, people pay over $10 million home on an average street in that area, and it's right on the fault line or within half a mile away from it. It just comes with the territory, and it's part of our nature.
And it doesn't
And then
allow
would you?
ignorance to be an excuse at this
Yeah,
point.
exactly. But it's also the case for whether it be flood or natural or fire hazards as well, right?
Right. Oh, one more thing. Lenders also look at this data as well. Insurance companies look at the similar data as well. From lenders' perspective, they want to make sure if you are going to be what's classified as a fire zone or a flood zone, you as a buyer, you're required to purchase your own insurance to protect the home, because obviously there's a mortgage on the home. And typically lenders will obtain their own flood cert or fire cert from their own resources. They may not use an NHD report. And some lenders look at this requirements in their own guidelines. But insurance companies, when you go on a website and try to get a quote for a car, they use weather data, this natural, pretty much most of the zones that I would cover. As an insurance company, they look at this data and affects the quote. There's obviously a lot more variables how they price you, but they use some of this similar data as well.
That makes
I think the most
a lot of
important
sense.
part about no,
I'm sorry,
entirely,
Colleen.
but I think the most important part about this is for disclosure purposes. So if there is any concern, it's in our best interest to get in touch and hire an expert to do further investigation, just to be safe at the end of the day. So again, this is why we want to have this value add for you and the clients.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Now, in addition to the state and the county level zones, there's notices and advisories. These are not a hazard zone. We don't particularly get data for it, but this is more like an FYI. In addition to the hazard zones, there's some additional advisors and notices you want to think about, and Robert can continue talking about the rest of. I think you're on mute, Robert.
Ah, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to all the zones that we talked about, some of these advisories and notices are there as an FYI. They're there to make sure the buyer has done their due diligence and knows everything about the property. Megan's Law lets you know if there's any registered sex offenders nearby. The Endangered Species Act lets you know about 300 different endangered species that might be, living in where your home is. And so that'll let you know if you have an endangered species, they're protected by the Endangered Species Act. There's some energy related to solar, oil and gas wells, mold, and so forth that could be affected by the property.
There's description about each one of this on the report. It talks about in more detail. So if the buyer has more questions about it and wants to investigate any of this a little bit further, the report will indicate and guide them where to go and how to obtain more information.
So we also offer an environmental report. This is not required to be provided by the seller. It's an optional report, but highly recommended because it adds more protection for the seller for a very low cost. Here's a summary: oil and gas wells, leaking underground storage tanks. There's two other public databases, NPL and EnviroStore, that keeps a database of uncontrolled abandoned waste sites and contaminated sites. I highly recommend to order this report. That anything that's man-made, that's related, that us humans have created, will be added to this report and will be on this report, and it's included in this portion.
I'll note on that as well. Back in 1920s to 1950s, if there was any gas station in the corner and there was an underground storage tank there, sometimes they would not remove that tank in a proper way where it wouldn't affect the soil. Instead, they might have built a home on top of that, or you know, some sort of new construction within nearby. So there is an agency, LUST, LUST, that kept track of this leaking underground storage tanks is what they call it. So there's a database around it. And so when you pull a report and you provide your address, our reports search for nearby information that could affect the buyer. Again, it will list that, hey, saying there could be an LUST related address nearby. Again, this is, you can't do much about it. It comes with the territory, but buyer has the right to know. It's just more of like an FYI, to know that, you know, within a mile of their home, there is a LUST related.
And so Vince, in regards to this report, like you're saying, it's an optional report. So what happens where the seller provides a report and they're only providing the standard report and not this option? Are agents like myself able to pay for it additionally? Would we be able to negotiate that? What's the process there like?
If my, you know, typically what I try to tell the agents is, you know, you're in a transaction, typically, let's say an average home is $500,000. The difference between the cost of regular, what's required compared to with environmental report, typically is about $20. So to me, is the way I'm looking at it is why risk the transaction just for $20 from sellers and buyers perspective. You know, the $20 is the lowest fee in that transaction, and to me, it's why risk it. And from buyers perspective, it's definitely more information for them to know, and from sellers perspective, it's more protection for them to let the buyer know we have shared everything we know. In addition to the natural hazards that affect the environment, there's some man-made hazards that could have affected the property, and here's the report on it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I would say just for ease of mind, I would rather have my clients have more information than less information.
Most definitely.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. I want to give them the truth. Hey, Vince, just curious. Do you happen to know a lot about, or have you heard a lot about the Irvine Great Park area? Because there was a lot of controversy of that land area, of how it was formerly used for military purposes, and did they put it in a way where it was just basically above average, and then they were able to sell it? Did you happen to hear any news about that?
Unfortunately, I have not, to be honest. I live in LA and I have definitely missed that. I'm sorry.
All good, all good. I was just curious because I know there's just some people who are adamant about not living in the new developments of Irvine because of that. And yet other people, obviously, they live there, they purchased, and it's in the disclosures, and no one tries to make a big fuss about it unless you dig deeper. But I was just curious about that.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. If you want, I can look into it more and provide an answer for you a little bit later after this meeting.
Sure. That'd be great.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Next thing is the hazard maps. Robert will talk about our maps. Yeah.
Yeah. So hazard maps, all our reports come with a nice looking map that's user friendly to read. And shows you how far or near you are to a hazard zone, as you can see on the left of the slide. So, you know, at the top picture on the top has a flood zone map. It's showing that that property is not in a flood zone. If it's in the flood zone, it would be highlighted like in the fire zone and the earthquake zone below it. It's color coded, but it shows you how far away you are from that zone, or how far in you are in that zone, how wide that zone is, how big it is. It's really fantastic. Once you log in and place an order, after you place the order, you can click action, real-time maps, select any of the available zones, and you'll get a nice visual representation of what that zone looks like for the subject property. It's really cool for you guys to use this. It gives you a competitive edge against the other agents out there, especially buyers who are young and challenge you as to why the home is in a particular hazard zone. You can really, you know, spell it out for them and show it to them, you know, so they can really see and get a grasp of what that zone is like.
Robert, I have a question in regards to this report, because it is super helpful. Are you saying that anybody can log on to Preferred NHD, or do you need to order the report and then be able to have access to it?
Anybody can actually, as long as you have a login, anybody can log in and you can actually access these reports as long as you have a login. Yeah.
Okay, so it's
the hazard
provided.
map.
You're just able to, you just need to provide the login information.
Yeah.
You need to place an order first to be able to access this feature.
Yeah, you need to have at least one order with us, but you don't have to place an order to access this. So if you have a home, if you're an agent and you have a home and you'd like to look before you talk to, you know, a seller or a buyer, if this home is in that is in a zone, and you want to have that information ready, you can access it, look at it, and then go to your buyer or your seller and say, hey, yeah, it's in the zone, before, you know, you even order a report.
Makes sense. So more so for the agents, but not the consumers.
Exactly.
So consumers who are trying to get onto the site and look to purchase an area, they wouldn't be able to do that unless they ordered it. But if they are working with their agent, like myself, who has access, who has placed orders, we would be able to look into those areas and provide them this information.
Correct.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
There's also, again, no cost. We, you know, preferred NHD only gets paid when your transaction closes. So why not just place an order, obtain the information you need to provide the correct information to your prospective buyers and sellers.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
And also another note, some of the NHD companies do not have hazard maps on their reports. Preferred NHD is one of the few. And this map section is it's integrated with Google Maps. It's easy to read. It's user friendly and makes the reports looks very comprehensive. And
Vince, why do you think the other companies don't have these maps?
It's not an easy thing to do. It takes from technological perspective, it takes a lot of efforts to put it together. Yeah. It's maintaining, imagine you go on Google Maps, you know, search for an address. On top of that, you have all these hazard zones that you have to overlay and together and create a report out of. So it becomes another database for an NHD company to manage. And technologically speaking, it gets challenging to include that in a report in addition to all the other hazard zones. And usually some reports, you know, are 50 to 80 pages long, and this is one of the harder pages to get it right.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that we have that benefit or that leg up in that sense with the technology that we have to be able to have these hazard maps.
Absolutely. All right. Next.
So on the next slide, you know, people always ask, when is the best time to order a report and why? The best time to order an NHD report is at the time of listing. It's always important to order it at the time of listing, the day one of your new listing. Why? Because you can grab your NHD report, attach it to the MLS. Now you have disclosed with the prospective buyer on day one. Because if you go into escrow, then order the NHD report, then you have introduced the use setup information to the buyer, which then gives the buyer legally a way out of escrow without paying penalty, even if the NHD report is not the reason.
This doesn't happen that often, but I actually have seen it happen about 3 times in the last 3 years. So if I'm not a listing agent, but if I was one, if I know that I can do something about it to protect myself from buyer backing out, why not?
Can you share with us one of the stories that you've heard where somebody backed out because of that?
Correct. It happened 3 times.
Can you share with us one of the stories?
Basically, there was an expensive home in Beverly Hills that one of clients placed an order, and the buyer had a change of heart and wanted to get out of escrow. Typically, they have to pay the deposit, right? So they used this NHD report as an avenue to get out of escrow without paying any penalties. The other cases are very similar. One of them actually truly what the buyer was not prepared to pay for the flood insurance, which was a mandatory. Obviously, the lender required it, but had the agent placed the report on day one of their listing, then the buyer would have known about this whole flood policy that they had to purchase day one of, you know,
Which is huge, because not a lot of consumers, not a lot of buyers are looking at those things, right? They're looking at the home. They're trying to figure out if their family is going to be able to play in the backyard. Is it going to be a safe neighborhood? Is the shopping area or the commute to work? But they're not thinking about the other ramifications, such as fire, earthquake, flood. And if you are in those zones, then yes, you're going to need insurance for that, and that's going to be added cost on a monthly, if not annual basis, that you'll need to factor into the finances. And so that's a great point that you bring up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you know, it's if you can protect yourself and your client, why not? There's no cost. It just takes a minute. That's why we always encourage the agents to place an order on day one. Go to the next slide. So we also, there's another report for the landlords. Robert will cover the rest as well.
Yeah, so we also offer tenant flood reports. There's also a report that's for landlords, just like bed bug disclosure reports. There's a new law that came into effect in July of 2018. Basically, the landlords only for residential properties are required to disclose with tenants if the property is in a flood zone. And we have those reports for free for those agents that work primarily with a lot of landlord investors. This will be a valuable report for you to provide to your existing clients or new clients to make sure that they are protected. We offer them for free, and some NHD companies out there charge up to $29 for this tenant flood report.
Awesome. The signature page is by landlord and tenants. So if you are an agent, this is a value added to your clients who are landlords who have investment properties. This is for residential properties. As an agent, they would add value to make sure your clients are protected so they don't get any lawsuits from their tenants regarding flood, and also make sure that landlords are compliant with all the disclosures.
Vince, any recommendation on when to provide that? Is it during, after, beginning?
It's before signing a lease agreement.
Makes sense.
You would put it in the agreement, basically.
Okay. And I see no difference whether you're buying or renting. You want to know what information lies in the ground beneath you or in the world and geography around you. So thank you again for that opportunity to provide this.
Yeah, flood has been a huge sensitive one compared to all the hazard zones because of, last 3-4 years ago, it damaged a lot of counties, both in Northern California and Southern California. And both from the tenants perspective and the landlords and homeowners perspective, everyone was affected. I even had a property myself that got flooded with a tenant, and it kind of got scary. I had to hire someone to take care of mold afterwards. So it's pretty informative information, again, both for protection, but it can affect landlords and tenants, and I'm happy that there's a disclosure to protect all of us.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And lastly, every report comes with tax information. Robert can cover the rest as well. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, so then lastly, every report comes with tax information, which is the separate disclosure. It provides the county tax assessment's last cycle assessed value and tax amount that the previous owner had paid. If the property is in a community district, facilities district, meaning it has Melrose or 1915 Act, it will disclose this information on the report and let you know.
Any questions on that?
That's good. No, that's good information to know.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. If not,
I just want to again reiterate the fact that the natural hazard disclosure report not only tells us information about the natural hazards, it gives us an abundance of information that's important in every transaction. And it's really important for agents like Will to have this information at their fingertips so they are the expert when they are consulting with sellers and prospective buyers and those into escrow. So again, thank you, Vince, for this marvelous product that I'm able to offer at Preferred NHD. And thank you, Robert, for that mastermind around the understanding of this report.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I know there's a lot of potential questions that may come from this. Feel free to reach out to us. We can connect you to Vince and Robert and even Colleen if there's questions about NHD or just the understanding of being within the Keller Williams family. And so we love to provide value, and we hope that this was helpful for you. Feel free to reach out to us again if you have any questions about this. But until next time, thank you so much for watching Will and Friends Real Estate Edition on Natural Has. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. Talk to you guys later. Bye for now.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.